3, 2, 1, and... What's going on, everybody? My name is Tony Mendoza, and we are in the heart of the Gulch, and we got an awesome, amazing guest today. And, you know, this guest not only knows how to play the drums amazingly, also in ways, a person that I wish I could live your life because you get to see all over the United States. We got David Schultz in the building. How's it going, buddy?
What is up, Tony? How are you?
Man, I am feeling good. I'm a little tired, but I can only imagine how tired you must be as well.
You know, yesterday I was awake for 24 hours. I did the math, yeah, because we just got back from New York City. We did Good Morning America, and my alarm was set for 1:30 Eastern time, and I didn't get to bed until about 12:30. Nashville time, which is central. And I remember I texted my buddy Parker, who works with me. I'm like, 24 hours, baby, we did it. So,
oh man, well, the fact is that you're here. You made it here in one piece,
yes,
and
sir.
That is the most important thing. So
thank you,
David. I appreciate you being on the show today.
Man, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to go into the beginning. Of course, that's the way we start in every show. Kind of talk to me about living in San Diego. How did you enjoy it, or did you live specifically in San Diego, or is it a city outside?
Yeah, so my parent, I grew up initially in a suburb called Rancho Penasquitos, and I really didn't have much going on until I moved to La Jolla. And once my family kind of relocated to La Jolla was when I started taking the bus, because back before we had Uber, you know, I got a bus pass and I would take the bus around to hang out with my friends, and we would go to Pacific Beach, which was a pretty lively spot in California, or in San Diego. You know, I would go downtown. We would travel all around the area, and having the bus pass was incredible because it was my first sense of independence.
Absolutely.
I got to give it to my parents too. You know, they a lot of different parenting methods shelter children, and they want to protect them from the things that
could happen.
Exactly. Of course. I mean, who would have thought to give me a bus pass when I was 13? My gosh.
Well, I mean, that's the beauty about parents, because they're able to put it all out there, and they're just not. They're also. I think with parents, it's a scary line, because you have to be able to not only shelter, but you also have to. In a way, at least from my family, I'm from San Antonio, Texas, and my parents being Hispanic, they instilled fear in me at a very young age. And so, but the fact is that you're able to walk around in San Diego back then is a totally different San Diego as it is today, right?
Of course, yeah. But no, I'm really thankful for that, because it allowed me to grow my network at the time. You know, I was very fortunate to have people around me that kind of showed me what things could be, and in getting that independence from my parents, I kind of saw some things that maybe I shouldn't have seen. You know, I kind of learned what not to do at an early age, which kind of instilled in me growing up, and you know, it helped me stay away from that stuff that I witnessed happen. I didn't want to be involved in certain things like that, you know, so it kind of, you know, it allowed me to make mistakes, learn from my mistakes, and at an early age, I was really able to start focusing on my professional career, which at the time was playing drums in local bands or DJing my local at my local high school.
When exactly? So are we talking middle school? Because I was a DJ back in middle school.
Yeah.
My dad was lucky enough to give me a little mixer, a 2 CD mixer. You remember those?
Yep.
And I was able to do just mixing then. And then that's when I kind of phased out of it and got into the audio engineering thing. I know that comes later on in life, but you got to real quick talk about the piano lessons, because we all start with piano, right?
Yes, we do.
And it's not, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's us growing up, but when it comes to piano lessons, piano teachers, they always want you to play the same stuff.
Exactly.
And it's just not as, you're not able to be as creative as you want to be. And piano's tough. But when it came down to piano and then transitioning to the drums, why did you make that transition?
Well, man, piano was so early, and that's so funny that you know that about me. But the piano lessons was probably in elementary school.
Really?
That was back when I lived in Penasquitos.
Okay.
And gosh, I hated it.
Yeah.
It was my first, I think, musical direction that my parents wanted to sign me up for. Kind of like sports, everybody gets signed up for sports, but
baseline. It's the baseline of music.
Man, I really don't think that I really pulled any inspiration from the piano lessons, to be honest. It wasn't until I discovered YouTube and I looked and I started researching bands, rock bands at the time.
Okay.
My dad took me to my first concert in San Diego, which was Velvet Revolver, this big time rock band who they're not together anymore. But the piano was probably in elementary school, and I started picking up the drums later in elementary school into middle school. I think the drum set was purchased probably in 5th or 6th grade.
Yeah, it's weird how things like that happen, right? When your parents will buy you that initial thing that you fall in love with for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, so talk to me about going through as a DJ then. Yeah. So it went from playing drums, and then how did that transition going into a DJ?
Well, I played drums for local bands, metal bands.
Really?
I grew up at this venue, Soma, in San Diego, where me and all my friends would just go to shows, local shows. National acts would come through, and it was just a really great place to meet people and to be inspired by music and to surround yourself with people that are like-minded. And after I started playing in those bands, the whole DJ era kind of evolved, and I started following this character, Skrillex,
of course.
Initially came from, a hardcore band and transitioned into electronic music, and that was really appealing to me because you saw all these visuals, you saw this exciting new part of music that was really, really popular.
It was just taking off. It was just taking off fully.
Exactly.
And then, so when you started DJing, I'm guessing you started DJing. Now, this is just when I started. So you were into playing the drums and playing an instrument probably from 6th to 8th grade, and then transitioned to DJing maybe 8th, or was it later past high school when you started DJing?
Yeah, 8th grade. I remember DJing my middle school's kind of graduation, last day of school.
I did the same thing.
Really?
That's so dope.
Funny.
All right.
Yeah, that was the first time that I remember actually mixing music. I think before then I was maybe going around to my friends' parties and playing iTunes, and
just playing the song. It wasn't like DJing is today. DJing today is able to fully automate, not even automate, it's just change the entire sound, and you're able to blend so much easier than you were back then. Back then, if you wanted to blend a song into another, yes, it was a simple fader, but you also had to cue it up at the right exact time, and it was a lot more manual. You remember those days?
I do, yep. Virtual DJ was my original program before I got into Tractor. Yeah, I remember you had to line up the bars that would be placed underneath the notes. Exactly.
Okay, so now talk to me about the transition when you wanted to get into sound engineering. So I remember researching you a little bit that you were looking at all the major programs that had not only engineering but just music inclined. So I'm guessing Berkeley.
Yep.
I'm guessing what did you ever look at Full Sail? Don't lie to me.
No, Full Sail was not on my radar. I was in this very prestigious environment, living in La Jolla, going to La Jolla High School, and all of my friends were applying for UCLA and the Harvard and the Ivy League. So I was looking at the programs at USC, the program at NYU, all of those very, very exclusive music programs that require a high GPA, they require a high test score, and most of those programs too also require you to have a principal instrument that you perform at.
To perform to get into the school.
Exactly. So I remember applying for Berkeley. I remember having to apply to, there was a program at the University of Denver that I kind of was interested in. And I remember having to go into these interviews and these auditions where I would have to, I remember having to get a drum teacher because I was self-taught at drums. I played music that I liked. I did not know how to play a samba or any of those traditional drumming techniques that they're looking at. Because when you play on a traditional instrument, you read music, you are directed, and you play in an ensemble where you all have to.
It's orchestrated in a way.
Exactly. So I just really did not find affinity with that. And I did not get into NYU. I didn't get into USC. I got into Denver, but I also got into Belmont, which was a school that I did not.
You weren't thinking of Nashville, right? No, not at all. And it was because of the music of choice too, right? Because the music of your choice wasn't necessarily country music. And the funny thing about Nashville is that, yes, there are a lot of country acts that started and really started to grow here. But one thing that is amazing about Nashville, and it took me moving here 2 years ago to realize that Nashville has such a ground basis of just Ostrom musicians, amazing sound engineers, and top of the line, everything you want. This is, and it hurts my heart because you guys know that I'm from San Antonio. You guys know I love Austin, but this is Music City, USA, and I got to give some shout outs to Nashville for that. But I do want to ask this question because you are the only person I've ever talked to that has actually gone through an audition for these schools, these musically inclined schools. Because when I was looking into going to college, I was looking at Full Sail. I chose not to do Full Sail because I just heard so many negative things about it. What I ended up doing, I chose football over the music, and I went to Texas A&M University. And but what I'm asking specifically for this question was, how challenging was the competition to get into these schools?
I think it was incredibly challenging. I think that, when you think about yourself in your hometown, you can be a big fish in a small sea, but when you actually diversify into this like national realm of applicants that are trying to attend these schools,
the best of the best,
you're up against a lot of people. And I kind of realized that I just really didn't. I mean, at first I thought I had a shot, but I was young and I didn't really have much of a musical foundation. But I was working really hard at pursuing my own, entrepreneurship through DJing, through the drumming.
That's how it started.
Yeah, and that kind of carried through to becoming, a concert promoter in college.
So you got to talk about, before we go to in Belmont. So when you transitioned to Nashville, since we are in the heart of the Gulch, I got to ask a couple questions when it comes to, when did you originally move to Nashville?
I moved to Nashville it must have been August of 2015.
Wow. So you've seen Nashville grow to what it is today, especially here in the Gulch. In the Gulch was not like this, not even 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So tell me about how different the atmosphere was.
I remember my first trip to Nashville, and I just kind of felt it was interesting because we landed and it was dark. So I didn't really get to see it, Nashville, other than in the dark. And then I just remember I was a little uncomfortable, moving from a beautiful beach community like La Jolla and landing in a place like Nashville. My initial reaction was like, man, I don't know if this is it for me. We went to a restaurant and somebody ordered grits, and I was like, what are grits? I've never had grits before in my life. And
no sweet tea over there either. And when you go to anywhere in California, sweet tea is not a thing. And then you come here and you're getting all these bad food for you.
I agree. So it was interesting, but I kept an open mind, and I remember what really clicked was when I saw Broadway, because I went to Broadway, and I just remember walking down the street, and every 5-6 steps I would hear a different band playing out of a window, from upstairs, from across the street. And I remember seeing the barricades that they have for musician loading. And I was like, wow, like this city has its own street just for music. And the music I was hearing wasn't bad. It was not the traditional country music that I associated with Tennessee and Nashville. And keep in mind, I grew up in California. I didn't really know anything about the South other than the stereotypical.
What you hear, just like what everyone hears about California.
Exactly.
I totally understand that.
Exactly.
And you were just amazed when you moved to Nashville. That's when you realized that, okay, Broadway, there aren't a lot of cities in the United States, if any, that are like Broadway. Same thing with Austin when you go by Southwest. There's nothing like it. And it really did make you kind of believe, like start to believe that Belmont was going to be your ticket in and finding new and effective ways to get your network out there. Because that's one thing we got to talk. And that's one thing I always talk about here in Heart of the Gulch is networking. Networking and building those relationships no matter where you are. Because you started in Belmont really and here in Nashville to make that network. So start talking about the sound engineering. I believe it was sound engineering, right?
Yeah, the program I was in was audio engineering.
Got it.
And I had to make a decision because the Curb College at Belmont, which was really the music school there, and not the traditional music school, it was more of the music industry school, because they did have traditional, you could study commercial music, I think is what they called it. You could study vocal performance, stuff like that, but you could also study music business, entertainment industries. They had they were just getting their motion picture program off the ground. Yeah,
that's amazing that they had that, because a lot of programs around the United States do not have specifically the music industry program.
Yeah, and that was something that I was very it was very encouraging to hear, because I was going to be around a bunch of students that kind of felt the same way. The USC and the NYU, they called it music industry, but Belmont kind of categorized it into music business and audio engineering. And when you go into music business, you also have to take a couple of audio classes. When you go into audio, you have to take a couple business classes.
Makes you well-rounded in the sense of the curriculum.
Exactly.
Now, so tell me about how cool it must have been to start actually getting your hand on some real gear, so real deal stuff.
Yeah, that was the goal. I realized that choosing audio engineering was going to be the most beneficial thing for me because of having access to that equipment. I figured that if I really wanted to learn about business, I could read books, I could use online resources, but if I really wanted to get my hands on that real equipment, the audio engineering program was probably going to be the best bang for my buck, just being there. And I learned a lot. I learned how much of a science it is. As it states in the title, audio engineering. We did math. We learned. We had equations that we had to use to calculate the different elements that were going into audio, and I realized that I found a real affinity with the live sound reinforcement classes that I took out, aside as opposed to the studio recording.
Because there's a huge difference, and I know we're getting a little technical out here, but there's a humongous difference between recording on, in a sound protected area, right? In a recording studio. You guys have all seen it in every movie, right? But when it comes down to tours, and when it comes down to concerts, and when it comes down to having the sound completely different, and you have to prepare for all these other things, and that's probably what really got, I guess, your juices flowing, because you're really in a situation that is unpredictable, but you have to do your job to the best of ability to make artists sound amazing, right?
I mean, yeah, and also instant gratification is huge for me, because
hearing the
exactly. When you are a live sound engineer, you typically set up the show, you do the show, and you pack it up all in the same day.
Yes.
So you work hard to create this foundation for the artist that you're working for, and then they play the show, and you see the show happen. And that's entertainment for people. That people go to that show and they have a good time, and then they leave, and then you get to pack it up, and the day's over. When you work in a studio scenario, sometimes you work on the same song for days and days and days, and then once that song is kind of complete, it kind of gets solidified, it gets mixed, it gets mastered, and then you wait months, sometimes years, for the song to actually come out. And then when the song gets released, and you're like, oh cool, I worked on that so long ago. And not only that, but then if you're lucky enough to have that song stream well or chart well, or if the song hits number one or is featured in a movie or a TV show, it takes a long time for that, like, wow, like I worked on that,
did this, and I have that sense of pride for doing it. And the thing is, when you go into a recording studio, and going back to Belmont, right, when you're in these environments, it is the making of something great. So it's not necessarily it's a totally different avenue, because when you talk about tours and when you talk about concerts, typically the music that is played in these venues are already accomplished, and you have all the crowd listening and singing to that song. So I totally agree with what you just said on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so then let's talk about after Belmont. So how did you start getting your first like initial internships, and what was the initial place where you started meeting these people?
Yeah, so that internships are huge at Belmont. They want you to apply for these companies and work as interns. And I don't think I ever actually had a real internship, but as soon as I started at Belmont, I carried over my DJing from high school. And when I moved to Nashville, DJing electronic music and dubstep, I kind of looked around and I was like, where am I supposed to play?
Yeah.
I remember there's a picture of me setting up.
Not like today.
Oh no, man. I remember setting up a table in the front lobby of my dorm and playing music for 6 people.
Really?
Yeah. And we would, house parties was really it. And I remember there was maybe one club in Murfreesboro, which might not even be there today, that kind of was an EDM club. But I started shifting over, like, okay, well, if there's nowhere, and I had fellow students and colleagues that also wanted to DJ electronic music. We didn't know where to go. So I kind of shifted over and was like, okay, if there's nowhere for us to play, I kind of want to be a part of facilitating that. And that's when I became a concert promoter and started hosting the events and hiring people to DJ. That was that was a project called Octo Music Group, and I had a partner, and we kind of threw these parties, we threw these shows, and it started off in basements of houses, and it ended up getting as large as renting out a large space at the fairgrounds and throwing a show.
That's amazing. And to be honest, that is probably what really started your ways of managing just an overall event.
Yeah.
Right. So that's
huge.
And that's kind of exactly what happened. So you were able to, so for the people that are following at home, right, it's just, you were able to start as just a musician, transition into playing music that you like and that people liked with you, transition into learning about the environment and the space that you like to work under. And then you took your own knowledge and you're able to produce it into having people over with promotion, right?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, man, that's awesome.
Thank you. Yep. I've looking back, I really set myself up for a very well-rounded, and I called it an education because that's what it was. We were in school. We were trying to, we weren't doing it to party. At least for me, it was to work alongside the students that were at Belmont that really didn't have any way to put what we're learning in class into fruition. And through Octo Music Group, we did that. We threw our own shows. We sold the tickets. We hosted DJs. We settled with venues. We entered into agreements. We built this. We had an LLC. We built a business.
You're building a business.
Yeah,
that's exactly.
But at the same time, I also worked as a stagehand through Crew One. So that was something else that kind of led me to becoming a tour manager ultimately, but was staying in Nashville over the summer and working as a stagehand at Crew One is a company that hires labor for these tours that come in. I built shows for Slipknot, Beyonce, Justin Bieber, countless other tours that came through, and I was just one person that helped the tour come in and build their show, and that was really cool for me because that was the first time I was able to really see what it took to put on a show. And at the time it was all surface level. I was pushing cases, I was unboxing lights, I was doing things with, people were directing me, telling me what to do, but that was my first kind of real experience in the touring industry, but as a local, of course. But
you were developing. So if one thing I've learned about you, David, is that you've been developing these skills from the beginning. And even while you're doing these tasks of just pushing crates, pushing, boxes and lighting equipment and everything like that, what you're really doing is you're kind of logging it into your back of your head, right? And you're like, okay, I'm going to keep this information for later.
Exactly.
And when I'm able to influence today, like, we're going to go into who you're tour managing soon, but I'm just saying when you go into that, now you have all this ammo.
It's all research.
Exactly. That's all it is. And then doing it firsthand.
Absolutely. And that brings it back to school too. A lot of people say you don't need a degree to work in music, but I think that having my experience at Belmont, learning what it's like to manage my time, to book classes and manage scheduling, communication, understanding what it feels like when you have an assignment due that you don't have done, or turning in an assignment with work that doesn't, accurately speak to your capabilities. It all translates into the workforce and working in music, because you have to communicate, you have deadlines, you have to make sure that your work speaks for yourself, and that that you don't have to do anything to justify it. Or if something happens and you make a mistake, you take ownership and you're accountable for your actions. Yeah. And through I think it's all very valuable for people to, be in school and to learn those. Because like you said, yeah, even if you're not doing exactly what you might want to be doing, you are learning what it's, you're learning valuable skills that are going to carry on to the next project.
So now we're going to talk about how you got in. So the first person that you're able to really work on the tour, who was that exactly?
The first person who hired me as a tour manager was this guy named Luke Pell. And I met Luke through working at Bandit Lights.
Okay.
So back to, to kind of tie it all back into Belmont, right? I'm an audio engineering student, and all of my colleagues, that are emphasizing in live music, they're applying for all these audio companies, Sound Image, Spectrum, Claire Brothers. I applied to work at this lighting company called Bandit Lights, and I got a job over the summer. I did, when most students go home during the summer and they see their friends and spend time with their family, I stayed in Nashville for a majority of it, and I worked in the warehouse down in Laverne at Bandit Lights, and that was my first actual experience at like a actual production company that serviced, now I'm not a stagehand, I'm actually working for this vendor that is providing a solution for a tour, so I'm kind of, hopefully moving my way up a little bit. And
little did you know.
Yeah. Okay. And Luke Pell was a Bandit client, somebody who was going to come in and rent, 8 lights, like very, very simple, but they wanted to hire somebody to go out with the lights and do it. And it was brought to me because they needed somebody new, and because it wasn't a big tour by any means. And I remember meeting with their team and applying for the position, and they said, all right, you got it. Like, can you leave tomorrow? And I remember I had a gig, because at the same time I was running my own production company with Octo Music Group. I was providing sound and lighting on the side.
Still doing promotions when you had this role.
Exactly. And I remember having to sub out a gig, because I was like, yes, of course I can leave tomorrow, but I have something I'm doing tomorrow that I need to make sure that I get covered. So my colleague Parker took my car and set up the speakers and did the show for me, so that I can go out with Luke and do my first weekend with him as a lighting guy.
Well, we got to shout out Parker, because he was the one that hooked you up with that first run. So that's
absolutely awesome. Shout out to Parker. Yeah, I don't know what would have happened if I couldn't cover the gig.
And what did you learn with Mr. Pell? What did you learn?
Well,
overall with your time with him.
Overall with Luke, I learned just kind of what it was like, because, he hired me as a lighting guy, but I had this idea of touring in my head. I kept asking questions. I kept asking how they did things. And it was kind of evident that they didn't really have much set up. Luke was a developing act, and we were all in a Sprinter, and part of, at first I didn't have to drive, but like they were all self-driving the Sprinter. And I just remember that they didn't really have much in place, and I was asking the questions, and it kind of made them think, oh, maybe this guy, he's asking the right questions. Maybe we should start, employing him to set the stuff up. And after the first weekend, they asked me if I wanted to be a tour manager. And I was so like, I was like,
were you nervous? Because once you are going into a new position or a new role overall in an area that you're not, fully in yet, immersed it, because you've been learning this entire time.
Yeah.
How challenging was that?
It was challenging. It was hard. When they first offered me the gig, of course the answer is yes. Like, yes, I want to be the tour manager. Because to think like at my age, being in charge of a whole tour, of course, like that's that's the dream. That's my shot. Like, I better take it. But I remember when it came down to it, okay, like, all right, cool. You'll be the tour manager. Now you have to go and advance the show. And I was like, what is that?
Then the responsibilities come along. It's not only the title, it's also going through and really diving deep in what they want. So how demanding was the new title of tour manager?
You know, at first it was surface level, like, because I had no idea what I was doing. You know, they said advance a show. I was like, okay, like, how do I advance a show? Like, what do I do? You know, pretty much I remember hopping on a phone call asking about, you know, okay, where are we going? You know, what are we doing? You know, what time does this happen? What time does that happen? Where are we going to park? Just the surface level details, you know? And eventually, because Luke had a pretty busy schedule, you know, I got the hang of it, and I started just building off of this little format that I started with, and into a much larger, extensive, template, if you would.
Coordination.
Yes.
And not only coordination, it's you being comfortable. So I think we're all like that, right? So me, for example, in my current role today, which we're not going to talk about where I work, but in my current role today, all comes down to getting in your happy place, getting in your sweet spot. And like you just admitted it just a second ago, you have a template.
Yeah.
And that template doesn't, if it breaks, it actually does make you a little nervous, right? Because when something goes out of hand and when a situation happens, that's when you're like, oh God, that I haven't seen this in a while, and you have to work on your feet.
Absolutely.
But I think it made it more amazing is that you became comfortable by going through your processes.
Yes.
And then after that, then the ball starts getting rolling, and then you start having more responsibilities, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's move transition into the CMAs. Talking to your first time meeting Mr. Jimmie Allen.
Oh, CMA Fest.
CMA Fest. It wasn't the awards.
Yes. No. Yeah. So I met Jimmie. Luke was performing at CMA Fest in Nashville.
Got it.
And Jimmie was this person who I had heard of before through somebody who worked with Luke. And I really didn't know much about country music at the time because I was in this Luke Pell bubble. And I met Jimmie at, Backstage at CMA Fest, and I remember seeing him, and he kind of looked like a rock star, man. He had his sunglasses on, he had his hats, and he just had this look on his face that like kind of was like, man, like you're a star. But we interacted in a very brief moment because he and Luke knew each other, and I met Jimmie and I said, what's up? And, he knew about what I did for Luke. And I knew a little bit about what he did as a musician, but I just remember he needed a capo. And I was putting Luke's guitar away at that very moment. And I was like, sure, here, use this capo.
So what is a capo? Just for the people that don't know what a capo is.
A capo is just it's something you put on the neck of a guitar that helps. You can play in different keys. It'll help. It's like instead of it essentially shortens the neck of the guitar into whatever key you want to play. So I gave Jimmie Luke's capo, and then I was packing up, and it was time to leave, and I was like, oh shoot, I gave Jimmie Luke's capo. Like I need to get that back. So I had to improvise. I literally just asked, I think the monitor engineer or somebody that was backstage at CMA Fest, hey, do you guys have an extra capo? And they gave me that extra capo. So I walked back to Jimmie. I said, hey bud, I need that capo back, but here's another one. You can use it, and I'll see you later. And that was the extent of my interaction with Jimmie. Yeah.
And when was this? What year was this?
Gosh, CMA Fest, that must have been maybe 2017.
2017. So this is really before, the breakout.
Yeah.
Right. So talk to me about the transition of really leaving and working for him.
Well, I was working with Luke for a while, and I was in school. And I was still, taking classes at Belmont the entire time that I was working for Luke. And Luke toured a good amount during the weekends, so that, I was able to manage my, absences at Belmont.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Without looking crazy.
Exactly. Yeah. No, but it was tough, man. But I was in the mindset of, I had just bought my partner out of the Octo business, and I was prepared to stay in school and finish my time there. I wanted to finish the program. I wanted to graduate, and I wanted to pursue Octo, on my own, and bring it to what I thought it was capable of. And I remember around that time, you know, Luke was slowing down. His touring was not as abundant. And I got a call from Ash Bowers, who is that person that worked a little bit with Luke, who kind of connected Jimmie, myself, and Luke. That was like the
little circle right there of communication.
Exactly. So Ash was like, hey, you know, we're looking for a tour manager for Jimmie. Like, do you know anybody? And at the time, I wasn't really invested into the touring community. You know, I knew a lot of people at Belmont, but they were all in school. Like,
Still in school.
They couldn't do it. And everybody else that I met in the industry was already working for somebody. So I said, I'll keep my eyes and ears open, but I don't have anybody right now. No.
But then you're able to you just took it, right?
Well, he asked me again, and same thing. Like, I'm sorry, like I don't know anybody. Like, I wasn't prepared to do it. I didn't know much about Jimmie, and I was loyal to Luke. He gave me my first shot, and I was confident that Luke was gonna, you know, make something happen. And then he asked me a third time, and the third time he asked was like, hey, we just need somebody to get us through these first 2 weeks of July, and that was in 2018. And it was essentially 6 shows in 2 weekends. And I remember the offer that he proposed was going to give me enough money to buy out my partner. So I was like, well, this is great. You know, I can experience this with this new artist and just kind of see what that's like. It's only for 2 weekends, and it's going to fund my buyout process. So I kind of just like, I was like, yeah, let's do it. You know, it took me to Canada for my first time. That was really exciting. And it was just an opportunity for me to do what I do for Luke, but for somebody else, which at the time I really had no experience doing. I learned Luke and what he needed, and now I was going to be able to do it for somebody else, and that was exciting. Yes. So the first 2 weekends of July 2018, you know, I saw some of the biggest shows I'd ever seen.
And that must have just made you feel amazing because that instant gratification, right?
Exactly. I remember being up in Canada. We opened for Luke Bryan. Gosh, that was such a cool festival, bigger than anything we had ever done with Luke. And Jimmie was just, his performance was incredible. I remember being inspired by it. And I just remember, for lack of better terms, like kind of falling in love with the gig. But I was still uncertain because remember, I was like, I had just bought my partner out. We had just figured this out. Like I was planning to finish school, and Jimmie was, you know, kind of getting busy. And, and I wanted to be there for Jimmie. I really did.
So you had to take the plunge.
I did. Well, you know, and another detail that not many people know is that Jimmie had me come in to potentially train a different tour manager to do that for him. He had somebody in mind that was going to come out the second weekend that I was going to train. And that person never ended up coming out because he was unavailable. And that's kind of when he was like, well, hey, if you're here, do you want to just do the thing? And I was like, I mean, yeah.
Why not?
This
right?
is awesome.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I remember I looked at his schedule and I looked at my school schedule, and I was able to I was able to accommodate all of the shows that he had up until the semester was over with just enough absences to where I don't have to withdraw from any of the classes. Because at Belmont, if you are absent more than a certain number of times, you automatically have to withdraw from the class.
Yeah. So when after you did that a calculation, right?
Yeah.
And you saw how many times you can leave, what made you want to, leave?
Well, it was all perfect and it was going to work out. And then Jimmie released his album, and they booked 7 shows in a week for album release week, and that was gonna put me over. Yeah. So I had to make a decision. I was like, and I remember the deciding factor was, one of those shows was for promotion. It was the Today Show in New York City. And I was like, okay, well, do I stay in Nashville, study for my physics test, or do I go with Jimmie to New York and do the Today Show? And I was like, you know what? Like, I got to do this. Belmont will always be there for me if I want to finish my degree. But right now, this is taking me to New York City, a national TV opportunity as a tour manager. That is amazing. Actually, first of all, because I knew you were talking a lot on that. Thank you,
man. First of all, when it comes down to the work, you took the initial dive, right? And you said it's time. It's really time, and everyone has that call at certain times. Mine was this year. Yeah. And it all comes down to just basically saying, if I'm ever going to get started in this business, I need to take some chances. And you're absolutely right. Education is something that's there for everyone, and you're able to, I mean, you're paying for the classes at the end of the day. If you have an opportunity that's worth taking, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. I say you go ahead and take it.
Yeah.
And so speaking of taking that opportunity, you know, one thing, we're going to move on to crowd noise in a minute, but I want to talk about the rigorous travel. I got to know, because there just must be, it must be tiring. Like you just said earlier today, you were at the late show yesterday, right?
We did the late show earlier in the week, and then we were at Good Morning America yesterday.
Oh my goodness. And then coming back to Nashville for a day.
Yep.
You're just going all over the country within a matter of a month.
Absolutely, yeah. Tomorrow we fly out to Portland, Oregon, which is kind of, you know, at the corner of the country. And the day after Portland, we have a show in Orlando, which is in the other bottom right-hand corner of the country, you know. So the only way that we can do that is to fly through the night and take a red eye. And those days are challenging for sure.
And so what is, so I got to know, prior to we go into these questions that I got for you, I want to know what are some of the challenges that you face having to go to so many different venues, having to go through and seeing is it very much like we were talking about having that a template? Is it pretty much the same template everywhere in every location, or do certain venues have different ways of putting on the performance?
Yeah, well, you know, the type of touring that Jimmie does, we typically call it Weekend Warrior, but we've only, you know, the way that it normally happens is, you know, you have a tour, the tour starts on this date and the tour ends on this date. And you know, for example, we are going on tour with Carrie Underwood in the fall, and that is going to be a very consistent tour, because what they do is they play the same type of venue in every city. They're arenas, and when you play arenas, you walk into a blank slate, and the artist brings everything.
Really?
Most of the time, that is the case. Yeah, especially like at amphitheaters too. You know, when you're playing these clubs at the House of Blues, you know, you think, oh, like the speakers, they stay here. You know, all the stuff, you know, the consoles, the lights, they stay here.
It's just the venue. So when you go into places like that, it's just the venue, and the artist is in charge and putting that all together.
Exactly. So like, for example, Carrie Underwood's going to carry her own stage. She's going to carry her own PA system, her own lighting. They're going to hang everything in the air. And yeah, they walk into a blank room, and that's kind of what I learned when I worked at Crew One. But that's going to be a very consistent tour. It's going to be the same show every night in the same type of venue, and it's going to be very consistent. So those shows are very rinse and repeat, you know, copy paste.
And what about like Birmingham, Alabama, when you go to a venue there?
So if we're not on a consistent tour package, you know, in the summer, it's very messy, because one day we might be playing a festival, the other, you know, the next day we're playing a corporate gig, the next day we're playing a fair, the next day we are a part of, you know, some sort of like just a random show at an indoor club. So every venue, every type of show is different. And typically we don't do it the same way twice, you know, and those are the challenging things. But yeah, I mean, typically shows are broken down into, we're either going to drive it or we're going to fly it, you know. So if we drive it, we establish consistency with our buses and our trailers. You know, we haul the same equipment and we set it up the same way every day, you know, give or take some sort of
What about mishaps, though? What about if a PA system busts, or what if something gets wet? I mean, how do you guys fix something that may happen? And it happens every day. So I turn on these lights every time before a guest comes sitting in this chair, because, if that light goes out, I mean, you have to be quick on your feet.
Absolutely.
So how have you been able to be quick on your feet with all the different tours and all the different locations?
So, thankfully we have a crew of people that are really taking care of the technical, requirements and the technical elements of the show. So yes, if a piece of equipment goes wrong and we need to replace it, we have a great team of individuals and a great crew. And back to Parker. Parker is now the one that's leading that crew. He's Jimmie's production manager, which is awesome.
Parker's always getting love in this show right here.
Yeah, I mean, we had a festival last year where it did rain and all of our gear got wet. And it was Jimmie's own festival. Otherwise, we really probably would have called it. But we had to unload the trailer and air everything out the next day. We had to keep it out in the sun and make sure that it got dried out before our gig the following day, you know, and that's tough. The instances that I typically deal with now are like canceled flights. So like on our way to New York, our flight got canceled, and I had thankfully only 6 people on that flight, as opposed to, you know, our typical crew is like 13, 14, 15. So, you know, getting 6 tickets on a different flight is a little bit easier than getting 15 tickets.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And there's a certain area that you'll so is this private, or is this also in different type of like United, or how?
Yeah,
how exactly?
It's a commercial flight. The flight we took was on Southwest, or the flight that got canceled was on Southwest, and we think that it was due to weather, you know, and then the flight got canceled, you know, hours before we were supposed to go on it, same day. So I had to take a look and I say, okay, what's the next flight out? Like, how can we get there? Because we had to be there that night because we had something the following morning.
Yeah, I mean, and it's something that you can't just stop. You can't just stop. You know, you're on this train and you have to go forward even if the tracks seem to be flying off, right?
Exactly.
Now, listen, we got to do crowd noise where we have some people coming in, and I already have them programmed here. You're going to hear some voices.
Awesome.
And just answer to the best of your availability, all right?
Okay.
David, what are the top 5 cities you've ever toured in with Jimmie Allen?
Top 5 cities. Okay. Well, I would like to say Tokyo is number 1.
Wow.
We went to Tokyo. Technically, the show is in Okinawa, but that was an incredible experience. Number 2 is probably Berlin. I had a great time in Berlin. You know, the internationals definitely take precedent. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Keep going.
We played a show in Amsterdam, which would be number 3.
How long are you in these cities, by the way?
Single days.
So it's just the environment, and you're getting to live off the atmosphere there.
Yeah, well, Tokyo we had a day off in Tokyo, so that was what made that special. You know, Berlin was special because we had a day off there. We did not have a day off in Amsterdam, but that show was. Actually, we did have a day off in Amsterdam. I forgot. And let's see. So that was 3. Number 4 has got to be Prince Edward Island, Canada. That was an amazing experience.
Where is that located in Canada?
It's Atlantic time. So it's like past New York, past Maine.
Wow.
It was a beautiful island that we flew into. That was actually, I think, that first show with that Luke Bryan show was in PEI is what the locals call it. And then I gotta say San Diego.
Okay, there you go.
Number 5. I mean, San Diego. You know, getting to come home, having my homecoming, and actually being able to perform at the same venue that I saw Velvet Revolver perform at when I was, you know, so young. That kind of inspired me. That was such a cool moment. Jimmie brought me out on stage, and I got to wave in front of like all these people. It was incredible.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. I would never imagine that it would have gone full circle like that.
Yeah.
That was a cool way of putting that. All right, we got 2 more. Here we go.
David, I had a question. Have you ever been starstruck on tour?
Okay. Have I ever been starstruck on tour? Yeah, absolutely. We were staying at the Sunset Marquis in Los Angeles. And I saw the bass player from Green Day.
Really?
Just chilling, like walking out, getting his car from valet. And he was alone. So I was like, all right, like I'm gonna use this opportunity. Like he's got a guitar backpack, you know. I'm like, I pretended like I didn't know who he was, and I was like, yo, like what is that? Is that like a guitar? You know, I'm like idiot. Like he's a bass player, of course. But we started talking a little bit. And I told him a little bit about what I did. You know, I was asking him like, are you going to a session? Like, you know, just, you know, small talk. And it was cool. You know, it was really nice. And at the end of it, we didn't talk about anything about what he did or anything. At the end of it, he got his car and he said, all right, David, have a good day. Like, don't get caught. And I was like, that's pretty funny. But yeah, that was cool. You know, Dead Mouse. I saw Dead Mouse that same day at the Sunset Marquis, and just this past trip in New York, Avril Lavigne and Mod Sun kind of walked by our group, and you know those those figures are really, it's cool to see. It's cool to be in environments where you can be like, oh yeah, like I know that person, you know, but it's nice to kind of, you know, to see that they're, you know, they're just normal
regular people
too. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that is something that I don't think the common folk that go to watch these musicians and just incredible, you know, celebrities, they're not used to seeing them, right? So that's where you get the initial freak out, right? But you live in Nashville. I lived in San Antonio. A long time ago, I used to sell True Religion jeans when it was hot, right? Not when they were in Walmart. And the people that you had met, like Usher and all these guys, would come in all the time because that's who could afford True Religion jeans at the time. Yeah. And you start to realize that these guys are they like to shoot the shit like anyone else. Yeah. They like to have fun, especially with their entourage. Yeah. And your job is, at least from my perspective, was to serve them, make sure they're good. But then when you finish doing everything, you just hang out and you talk to them. So, you know, when it comes down to people and seeing people freak out, I totally get it. But at the end of the day, exactly what you said, they're just regular people like everyone else. Yeah, of course. And it's cool to see. It's very exciting, of course. And it's nice too, because being in the industry, you kind of have stuff that you can kind of relate on with these people now, you know. Oh, absolutely. I remember, you know, we saw Mod Sun play at this free concert on a day off in some sort of a mall. It was actually like, there were some like Guitar Center speakers up. Like, it was a very like stripped down show, but it's a small world, you know. You can interact with these people and bring up, you know, things that connect you, which it's really exciting to see. So, and especially by the way I know that you learn and the way that you're able to see things and you're able to keep things in the back of your head, I'm sure you have no problem establishing those relationships. Yeah. And speaking of relationships, we got one more question. All right.
David, what's your craziest story from touring on the road?
Craziest story from touring on the road. Gosh. Okay. I mean, yeah, this is it. So,
I saw you literally figure it out in your head.
Well, cause you know, things happen all the time. It's hard to think about one specific situation, but I mean, there's one that you can't forget.
All right, let's do it.
I remember we were in Germany. We had done shows in Berlin, Amsterdam, Hamburg, and Frankfurt. I think we ended in Frankfurt. And I was so tired. I was ready to go to bed. We were going to have a couple days off before flying to Australia. And I remember it was in the middle of the night. And I was sharing a room with Jimmie, actually. Okay. Because we shared rooms at the time. And I remember getting a call, or Jimmie was awake. I was dead asleep. Jimmie kept getting calls from his family, from the record label, from his management. I'm like, what's going on? Jimmie's like, Dave, like, I kind of want to go. I think we should fly to Australia tomorrow. And I'm thinking, like, what's going on? No, like, we have hotels, we have a flight in 2 days. Like, why are we going to Australia early? I was like, can we just talk about it tomorrow? You know, and I went back to bed. And he woke me up again and was like, no, David, like, people are calling us. Like, I think we need to leave. And that was when, at the time, President Trump had his press conference about banning incoming European travel because of COVID. This was early 2020. Really? We were in Germany. And I woke up and I looked at my phone and I just kept, you know, it was in the late evening for our folks that were back in the States. And it was evident that something was going on and they were going to shut down the borders and we needed to get home, like, immediately. So I worked with our record label to try and get us on flights, but the record label couldn't get us on like the same flight because this had happened. Everyone was booking flights to the States. Everyone was trying to get home. Yeah. So I looped in our travel agent, Evan, who is a huge resource, by the way. Like, anytime a flight gets canceled, having his team, work with us to rectify travel is the most incredible asset, and I'm so thankful for him and his team. And Evan got us the last tickets on this flight on Singapore Airlines from Frankfurt to New York City. You're kidding me. And that was us, like, getting out of Europe. Like, once we landed in New York, we had to figure out another way to get to Nashville because every flight was selling out, and I literally had to figure this out all overnight. I didn't sleep that night. I knocked on everybody's door. I said, wake up, like, we're leaving, pack your bags, were getting in a vehicle. You know, Parker called this like random dude that had a van, because in Europe they don't have like large vehicles that, you know, their taxis are small, their Ubers are small, but Parker got this guy who had this like big van, and we called him up and he picked us up from the hotel. We drove to the airport and we checked all our bags. We flew to New York. We got our bags back. And then we flew on a different airline back to Nashville. And that's when everything shut down and all of our shows at that point got canceled. We were no longer going to Australia, and that's when the lockdown happened.
But you know what? From that story alone, which was an amazing story, you guys are scrappy and you guys are resourceful, because the amount of stress that must have added to you guys in your daily life. And it also shows me that when it comes down to these projects, when it comes down to just managing a team, you know, you have to be willing to sacrifice your own personal sleep, your own personal schedule. So I think that's amazing. But before we get out of here, I need you to do one more thing for me. So what we do is we do something called Walk the Line on the show. Yeah. And Walk the Line is your kind of day in the life. And I know you're a busy guy. Hopefully one day we can make that happen. Hopefully we can make that happen. And when you guys are watching this today, I hope it comes on right after this. So what I need you to do, David, is go straight into that camera right there. Say, hey, I'm David Schultz, and this is how I walk the line.
All right.
All right. Ready? After 1, 2, 3, and...
What's up, guys? I'm David Schultz, and this is how I walk the line.
On the track.
Always rolling.
Based on how they've experienced coming in and seeing what the best option is. The docks would be, I mean, it's an elevator and a walk across, you know, an exhibit hall. You know, that might be all of this information, show notes, tickets, all that stuff. Seating chart, other acts on the bill, venue notes, media policies, schedule, ground transportation, dressing rooms, production office, hospitality, meals, merchandise, security, meet and greet, guest parking, bus parking, hotel. If we're running a little behind, I'm the one communicating, hey guys, probably looking at 5 minutes behind. Hey, you know, we're going to start with this song tonight, or we're going to change this. Just fielding all of those last minute adjustments as they come. And then once Jimmie hits the stage, I typically watch 1 or 2 songs, make sure that everything's good. I will walk out to front of house to say what's up to Parker and Lane, to kind of see how the show looks, hear how it sounds, touch base with them for a minute, and then if it's a busier night, maybe yes, I will recede back to the production office to finish up a project that I'm working on. Or if it's a festival show and it's not too long, I might stay out the entire time. But we have great people in... This is our gold microphone. This is the spare one that we keep nice for TV. The other gold microphone that we'll use for today's performance is actually on stage already. We carry these security wands that'll detect metal. I have my big stamper. It's a date stamp for you know, daily passes that we have, dating anything. It's a special stamp. It's custom. It's not custom to a T, but it's not just like a date stamp that you can get at an Office Depot. I learned this from a different tour manager. It's better to have a nice, big, legible date stamp so that you know that the passes that you stamp out that day actually came from you. And yeah, it flies with me everywhere I go. Oh, cool. All right. Let's do it. Let's go. yeah, today our buses are actually in Montana. So like, even though we're in Nashville today, we're like treating this like a fly date. So like, when we fly into shows, we like end up backline. We call it backline because typically a company will provide all the instrument, like the amps for us, the drum kit, the keyboard. SIR is the company in town, so we lucked out. They're good. They're great partners. The things we do travel with are the things that make our set unique, like pedal boards, the drum head with our logo on it, specific guitars, microphones, stuff like that. The ticketed show is a private event for a company who is kind of hosting like a little party for their employees and board members and stuff like that. So sweet. So this is our dressing room. This looks awesome. Every day we advance specific items that the tour likes. Dude, this looks awesome. We ask for sour beer, and every day we get like a different sour beer. This looks incredible. I've never tried this. That's the exciting part too, is like sometimes a venue will get you something you've never tried. You're like, oh yeah, like I want this. But yeah, like we have juices, sodas, coconut water, kombucha, farmer's fridge salad. Zoom in on that. That's for me. Those salads are actually really great. I found them at the airport, and just like having salad in a jar is super helpful because you can just like shake it up and it'll like toss itself. It's great. Certain alcohol brands that we like and everything like that. These are like pellet ice. We love pellet ice. Oh, and you can't forget the gold solo cups. Specific. These are so important that I even carry them in my work box everywhere we go, just in case they don't have them. We'll go back to my production office and I'll show you exactly where the gold solo cups are. But yeah, the other thing too is, you know, we have same way that we'll have a dressing room. Hi, Jordan.
Hi.
This is Jordan. She's a friend of the tour.
A friend?
The drummers, aka the drummer's wife.
Yeah, that's me.
She's a friend.
Thanks.
Good to see you.
Is it that room?
Yes, the other room right there.
Thank you.
So, as you can see. All right, Heart of the Gulch. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. You've seen a little bit about how I work. You've seen where we're at. The reason why we can't continue, we're going to be leaving a little early, is because this is a private event. So we don't have access to actually capture moments of the show. I know those are the moments that you guys really want to see. So hopefully again, sometime soon, I'll get to come back on. We'll get to do this thing for real. So thank you guys for joining. We'll see you next time.